where are we with the talks? Bring me up to this point, and give me a week into the future. Where do you see us being here over the next couple of days?
Well, first, we've progressed in some of our areas that we really needed to talk in, and pretty much opening the door for the collective bargaining conversation. And I believe we're moving definitely in the right direction for reforms. There was some suggestion to go to a fact-finding process before a strike could actually happen. There will be a full process of transparency open to the public knowledge and arbitrator involved in order to get there, if at all a strike is necessary. CTU has a different CTU would like to be in line with the rest of the state, and I think that's a fair request. However, most of the reform groups feel that it's a different school district. It should be treated slightly different and have an interest arbitrator process instead of the fact-finding, which CTU opposes right now. And so we still have a lot of work to do in the collective bargain area, but I believe I've got great help, great staff. We're all involved. The dialogue has been good. We want to continue that, and my goal is to have a bill next week.
When you talk about collective bargaining, it obviously is strike and right to strike, but does that include things like length of the school day, benefits, length of the school year, tenure, streamlining a teacher firing process? Is all of that going to be part of collective bargaining, or in these talks are those sort of separate issues that could be checked on and off? I imagine that they're all at different levels of I don't want to say success, but there are different points in that conversation.
They are, but we've advanced past the streamline and dismissal conversation. We've addressed reduction in force. We've spent time on attainment of tenure. We've addressed seniority. We've really addressed a lot of those issues. Collective bargaining is its own subject, if you will, but it does relate to the length of school day. So the proposal to increase the school day would ultimately increase the school year in terms of how many school days that those extra hours total out to be. So there is a proposal to increase the school day in Chicago by an hour, and I don't get the feeling that CTU is opposed to that concept. However, they would like to bargain the benefits of it, the wages and everything else that goes into it, the insurance and all of that, as it relates to lengthening a day that will ultimately add more school days to their calendar. I think right now they're about 150, and the goal will be around 170, 180.
When you look at this from a big picture standpoint of, okay, everything that falls under the umbrella of education reform, do we have an agreement on more than half, on almost everything? Is collective bargaining really the only wrinkle that still needs to be ironed out?
Pretty much, and we bargained that last, or we saved it pretty much for last in negotiations, because it's important that we look at education reform as what's best for the student in the classroom. And we approached it from that perspective, and that perspective has allowed us to come up with agreements on so many issues. Climate survey, report card modification, there's so many other areas that we touched on as well. School board training for their members elected, and all of those things. But collective bargaining by rights of the union groups, that law hasn't been touched since it was enacted, and we're really wanting them to do something that they haven't had to do. And so you want to make sure that you pretty much work out as many details as possible and lead yourself into the tough areas that may take more focus and constructive dialogue. And so we're doing that. And I'm pretty impressed about where we are. I think all the groups are really stepping up together collectively.
This all of a sudden got real. I mean, this became less about talks or less about piecemeal legislation, and now we're talking about something that could be wide in scope and depth. How long term do you think this is? Would this bring reform and labor peace to schools for the next 3 years, 5 years, longer than that?
Well, I think the history around here will show that in 1983 was when the first collective bargaining initiative took place and a law was actually put in place in our statute. Some changes were made in January of '84 that remove education only out of that total package of collective bargaining. But then in 1995, some more changes were made, 11 years later, that separated Chicago school district in many levels in the school code, in the way they bargain and things of that nature, because it's just such a huge school district. In fact, it's the third largest school district in the country, other than New York and California. And that school district has sometimes areas where it cannot be treated like the smaller school districts and rural districts, suburban districts across the state. The population just demands so much more in all the other areas that fall within that, under that umbrella. And so you're looking at a situation where we had to hold those discussions and address it from that perspective. And if the last time was '95 and now we're at 2011, I would hope that in the work that we put in and the effort that's being illustrated here would prove to be something that has some longevity. I can't say, I would hope that 3 years from now we wouldn't be back at the table, but I hope that it would have some longevity, it would prove beneficial. The way we evaluate our teachers, the way we evaluate our principals, our superintendents, is all important. This isn't just about the teacher. This is about the whole administration, the management team, the school board members, and the effects leading to the child's education.
And this will be my last question because I know you got to go and talk. I wrote a couple of stories. I wrote a lot about Race to the Top. I've written a couple that say it was may have been a waste for the state because we didn't get the big federal payout. But a lot of these discussions began with Race to the Top.
Oh, yes.
If this happens, if these reforms happen, everything from collective bargaining down to the way the teachers get paid, does the credit have to go to Race to the Top, even though the state didn't get the billions that everyone had hoped we were going to get?
Well, I think Race to the Top brought stakeholders in education to the table finally. Unfortunately, we didn't receive all the money that we'd hoped we did, but we still received millions of dollars from the federal government that we would not have otherwise had in the state of Illinois. So that was not a total waste. Our longitudinal data system will be funded as a result, and some of our performance evaluation initiatives and professional development and things of those nature also received a financial bump. So I wouldn't say that that was a total loss. The benefit of Race to the Top, again, we were after lucrative money. We were trying to do it in a short period of time. We had to reach a federal guideline, so it was nothing at our level that we had control of. So negotiating at that degree brought everyone to the table, and that's where we had never come to an agreement to sit down and negotiate reforms. The Burnham Plan came up back in 2003-4. It isn't new that we're just talking about reforms. It's just the Race to the Top. It opened the door for us to be at the table. And as a result, we revolved into education reform is necessary, and here's a number of areas that we should focus on, which will ultimately lead to school improvement, student achievement, and closing the academic achievement gap. So that's where we are. It's not that we've never wanted to do it before. I think Race to the Top just was our driving force to get us all honest and fair, willing to negotiate at the table.